The Denver Broncos are set to take on the Los Angeles Chargers in Week 6 of the 2024 NFL season. The Broncos are riding high right now off of a 3-game win streak. Their defense has played amongst the best in the NFL. They've been physical, they've been aggressive, they play a lot of single high man coverage, they blitz like crazy, one of the top blitzing teams in the NFL. Vance Joseph has this unit playing elite football right now. Vance Joseph went from a coordinator 1 year ago, giving up 70 points in Miami. He was looking like he was going to be out of a job, to now being a possible coveted head coaching candidate this next cycle because of how well this defense has performed. Offensively, we're seeing growth and improvement each and every week. Weeks 1 and 2, it was pretty rough for Bo Nix and company. They struggled to get anything going. Week 3 against the Buccaneers, the Broncos offense had that breakout performance. In week 4 against the Jets, granted, the weather didn't help matters. The offense struggled a bit, but in the second half, the weather let up. They made the plays that they needed to make in order to win the game. And then last week against the Raiders, it started a little bit slow again, but after the Raiders had started off 10-0, the Broncos scored 34 unanswered points. The PS2 pick 6 helped, but offensively, after that point, they started to get into a rhythm. They started to move the ball, and they were finishing drives in the end zone, scoring points, which was huge for the overall development of the Denver Broncos offense. Bo Nix had a 3-touchdown game last week. His athleticism and his mobility has been a key part of his success in the NFL as well. I think that we've seen the best out of the Broncos' run game over the last couple of weeks. Javonte Williams has looked good. Jaleel McLaughlin's looked good. And now we've got Audric Estime stepping back in this week as well. So that's really going to help complete this run game unit for the Denver Broncos. And overall, their defense is really the star of the show here, but I think that offense and special teams have both been big reasons as well why the Denver Broncos have won the last 3 games. As far as the Chargers are concerned, they started off the first 2 games of the Jim Harbaugh era 2-0. They played against 2 of the worst teams in the NFL, in the Raiders and the Panthers, and they dominated both of those teams. They then went out, faced the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 3. Justin Herbert was injured in that game. They ended up losing. They kept up pretty well with the Kansas City Chiefs the following week, and they were able to at least keep it a close game, but ultimately Kansas City pulled away at the end there. The Chargers are kind of trying to do a little bit of soul searching coming off of their bye week because they're dealing with some injuries, and they need some guys to step up in key positions. And much like, it's kind of the opposite of Denver, actually, where the first couple of weeks their run game was dominant, their offense was really producing at a high level, but then the next couple of weeks after that, it started to fall off a cliff. Their run game struggled. Now Gus Edwards is injured. He's on IR. J.K. Dobbins had a dominant first couple of weeks. He's kind of fallen off. So the Chargers are kind of trying to do some soul searching here. Their defense has been good, but they still have question marks. We're going to talk about that in this video. If you guys are not familiar with how we approach these game preview videos here on the channel, we like to look at things from the opponent's perspective, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and what they can possibly do to attack the Broncos, and how the Broncos in turn can exploit some of the weaknesses on the opponent. So we're going to look at this Chargers roster here, courtesy of our lads. Just talking about coordinators for 1 second here. Greg Roman is the Chargers offensive coordinator, a hire that I think the jury is definitely still out on. He flamed out in Baltimore because his scheme got very stagnant. He wasn't really opening things up for Lamar Jackson through the air. Greg Roman's scheme has always depended on having a running quarterback, and Justin Herbert just isn't that. He can run, he's athletic, but he's not a quote-unquote running quarterback. And I'm just wondering if long-term this Greg Roman hire was the right move for a quarterback like Justin Herbert. The time will tell with that. Defensively, it seems they might have hit a home run, though, in the hiring of Jesse Minter. It's another one of those Baltimore Ravens, Mike McDonald type schemes. The Broncos did struggle with that defensive scheme in week 1 against Seattle, but they're going to be a lot more prepared for some of the looks they're going to get because they face this scheme in week 1. They're going to have a lot more tape on it. They're going to know what to expect. I anticipate Bo Nix looking a lot more comfortable in this game than he did in the week 1 game because of the way that this defense, or because of the way that this defense just shows exotic looks. Bo will have seen him before. It's going to look a lot better. Special teams coordinator Ryan Ficken, he's been there a long time, one of the better special teams coordinators in the business. Let's start off by breaking down this Chargers offense, and it all starts off with Justin Herbert. We all know what he is when he's healthy. He's one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL, has easily a top 3 arm in the NFL. The dude has elite arm strength, elite arm talent. He's got ball placement that's just gorgeous. Justin Herbert, great athlete, good size, good athleticism. We all know that Justin Herbert is an elite player when he's healthy, but the problem is he hasn't really been healthy this season. It all started back in training camp when he suffered plantar fasciitis. And Broncos country will remember when Peyton Manning had it, that it takes several weeks to really shake that injury. And Herbert also suffered an ankle sprain a couple of weeks ago that kind of compounded this issue. It was on the same foot, which just is a complete pain. So he really is struggling right now with these injuries. Coming off the bye week, he should be at least healthier, but the plantar fasciitis is probably something that's going to linger throughout the majority of the season, and high ankle sprains can re-injure real easily. They're a pain. So we'll see what the status of Justin Herbert's health is as we move into this game. He's off the injury report, but I question if he actually is 100% healthy. We'll definitely keep an eye on that, but I do think that they've got a reliable backup quarterback in Taylor Heineke in the event that Justin Herbert were to go down. They saw their backup quarterback play this offseason with Easton Stick, and I believe it was Max Duggan as well, the former TCU quarterback, and it was pretty terrible. So they went out and traded for Taylor Heineke from the Atlanta Falcons, and I think that was a really good move in the event that Herbert suffers more injuries. Chargers, you'll remember, they went through all those years with Phillip Rivers where Rivers never missed a start. There was one thing that you could depend on with the Chargers and rely on with the Chargers, and that was that number 17 was going to be out there. Herbert, these last couple of years, has dealt with injuries. He hasn't missed a game yet this year. He was pulled from the Steelers game, but last year suffered a season-ending injury. We'll have to see if health for Justin Herbert is going to be more of a long-term concern, both in this game as well as throughout the remainder of this season. Moving into the run game for the Chargers, it started off really hot with J.K. Dobbins there for those first couple of weeks. He was on fire, but he kind of came back down to earth in the games against the Steelers and the Chiefs. And to make matters worse for the Chargers run game, like I mentioned earlier, Gus Edwards is now on injured reserve. So we're going to have to see if Dobbins can kind of recapture that week 1 and week 2 form. If he can't, then I think this Broncos run defense is going to feast, much like they have for the rest of this season. They've been a top run defense this year. They've got a couple of depth guys in Hassan Haskins and Kamani Vidal, but I don't think either one of those guys are going to be huge factors. Moving into the wide receivers, Quentin Johnston, their former number 1 pick from TCU, looks a lot better in year 2 than he did in year 1. He struggled with drops last year, was pretty much a meme because of how bad it was. This year, it's a lot better. He's not dropping the ball nearly as much, and he's actually been a reliable target for Justin Herbert. But their leader in receiving yards right now is actually Ladd McConkey, their second-round pick out of Georgia. He gets work in the slot as well as outside, so I think both Riley Moss and Jaquan McMillan are going to see him. Quentin Johnston is going to be mostly matched up against PS2. Then you've got Joshua Palmer, who can get some reps in the slot as well as outside. Same thing, it's going to be Riley Moss, Jaquan McMillan. I'm confident in both of those guys because they've been so shut down this year that they'll be able to take away Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, and Josh Palmer. But again, McConkey does scare me a little bit because he's played very well this year. You look at Brendan Rice. Yes, that is Jerry Rice's son. He's a guy who can also maybe be that fourth guy that could step up for the Chargers. Simi Fehoko and Darius Davis, couple of speed merchants there, especially Davis. He's primarily a return guy. Looking at tight ends, Will Dissly is the leader in the clubhouse in terms of receptions. It really should be the other way around here. They got Hayden Hurst as well, former Bronco Eric Tomlinson, as well as Stone Smart. I think pretty much any of these tight ends could actually start in Denver right now. That's how bad the tight end room for the Broncos is. Moving into the offensive line for the Chargers, they are dealing with some injuries there. Rashawn Slater, their left tackle, is questionable in this game with a pectoral injury. I think he plays, but he's probably not going to be 100%. This could be a good matchup for guys like Jonathan Cooper, Nick Benito, Jonah Ellis to possibly get some sacks against an injured Rashawn Slater. Joe Alt has also dealt with some injuries, the number 5 overall pick at right tackle, but he should be good to go. You got Trey Pipkins at right guard, Bradley Bozeman, the former Raven and Panther, as your starting center, and then Zion Johnson as your starting left guard. So then moving in here to... Oh, and I want to talk about Scott Matlock as well because he's an interesting story. He's a defensive lineman that also plays fullback. Remember, this is a lot of former Ravens on this coaching staff, and there's a similar player on the Ravens in Patrick Ricard who started out his career as a defensive lineman and has now moved to fullback. Scott Matlock is kind of a similar situation there. Really cool story with him. I just wanted to give him some love. Fullbacks matter, damn it. Moving into the defensive side of the ball for the Chargers, they have played some good ball this year, without a doubt. But the injuries are kind of starting to stack up on that unit. That all starts off with Joey Bosa. It seems that injuries are just going to be what defines Bosa's entire career at this point. Great pass rusher when he's healthy, but he's been injured for the better part of the last 3 seasons. The Chargers haven't really gotten to see Joey Bosa at his full potential in quite a while. I actually think that he could be a possible trade candidate as we get close to the deadline. I think it might be time for the Chargers to move on from Joey Bosa. That's just my opinion. I know Chargers fans aren't going to put a lot of stock in that as an analyst of an opposing team, but I do think that Joey Bosa, again, when he's healthy, he's a great player. He's questionable in this game with his injury. We'll see if he does go or not. But that's where the injuries really start with the Chargers. Asante Samuel Jr., their starting corner, he went on injured reserve today along with Gus Edwards. Jasir Taylor, their nickel, he's down for this game with the fibula injury. Dean Leonard, one of their backup DBs who's played good football, he's down in this game as well. The Chargers are dealing with a lot of injuries on this side of the ball. Their run defense, which has been a laughingstock in the NFL over the last few years, has actually gotten a lot better. I want to give them some love there because I think that is one thing about this Chargers team that has significantly improved. Their interior defensive line, although it's not a lot of household names, Morgan Fox, the former CSU Pueblo star, Puna Ford, Otito Obonia, Justin Abige, Tyir Tart, those guys are not household names, but they are reliable veteran players in the NFL, with the exception of Ibwige. He was drafted this year. But I think that they've gotten the job done quietly on that unit, and also helping this run defense is the 2 volume tacklers that they have in Dan Henley and Denzel Perryman at linebacker. Perryman and Bosa are actually the final 2 San Diego Chargers that remain on this roster, and I think Perryman and Henley have both played good football. Henley actually leads the Chargers in tacklers this year. They've also got Junior Colson there. He's dealt with some injuries though, and then they've got Troy Dye, the former Minnesota Viking, as backups at off-ball linebacker. Khalil Mack scares the living crap out of me. Broncos country knows that Khalil Mack can wreck an entire game. You remember last year against the Raiders where he had 6 sacks in one game. You think about 2015, yes, it was a long time ago, but Khalil Mack had 5 sacks in that game against the Broncos. That was the year where the Raiders beat the Broncos in Denver during the Super Bowl year for the Broncos. Khalil Mack has terrorized AFC West opponents for the last several years. I'm worried about him because the Broncos are dealing with injuries on their offensive line. Matt Peart is now going to step in and be the Broncos' third starting right tackle this season, with Alex Palczewski down with a high ankle sprain. Additionally, on the other side, Garrett Bowles, who Mack is predominantly going to be matched up against, has not been playing good ball this year. I'm worried that Khalil Mack could have 2-3 sacks in this game, especially if Joey Bosa doesn't play. Then it's going to be all Khalil Mack. They do have Bud Dupree. He's a veteran depth piece. He's been a reliable player over the course of his career. Played some really good football when he was with the Steelers. So the Chargers have some good depth here on the edge rush unit. Tuli Tuipulotu as well. He's also a really good player in the event that Joey Bosa can't go. But Khalil Mack scares the crap out of me. We already talked about Asante Samuel not being able to go. I'm very curious to see who's going to step in at the boundary corner position here. I don't know if it's going to be Cam Hart or who else it's going to be. Christian Fulton, he's off the injury report. He should be good to go in this one, the former Tennessee Titan. He's a guy who's probably their most reliable player on their cornerback unit right now. Derwin James, he's honestly, I feel like, towards the back end of his career. He hasn't played as good of football as he has in previous years, but still one of the better safeties in the NFL. And they've got Alohi Gilman as well. This Chargers secondary seems to be a weak spot on their unit right now with the injuries that they're dealing with at the cornerback and nickel positions. So that could be a matchup that the Broncos could look to exploit in terms of their passing attack, maybe being able to get something going in this game. Just briefly taking a look at special teams, Dicker the kicker, Cameron Dicker, one of the best kickers in the NFL. J.K. Scott, the native of Denver, Mullen High School graduate, is their punter. And then Josh Harris is their long snapper. We gave some love to Darius Davis as one of the better return men in the NFL as well. I'm looking at guys, I believe Tony Jefferson was called up to the active roster, the veteran safety, so that's going to at least help out their secondary a little bit. I'm curious to see if they're going to make any other moves to bring up a cornerback with the injuries that they're dealing with at that unit right now. But right now, both teams are beat up with injuries. The Broncos have issues on their offensive line. Josh Reynolds is injured, but right now, the Chargers look like they're a more injured team. And on paper, I think that this Broncos defense matches up really well with this Chargers offense. I think that secondary-wise, I think the Broncos match up well. I think their run defense matches up well. The question is, will the Broncos offense be able to overcome the injuries on the line? I don't think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I don't think that the Broncos are going to put up 38 points like they did last week. Or 34 points, I should say. But I do think that the Broncos are going to come away with the victory because I think they match up better on that defensive side of the ball. So I have the Broncos winning. I'm going to say the score is 17-14. I think that the Broncos will be able to ultimately overcome some of the deficiencies that they have on this offensive line. I think that the Chargers' injuries that they have in the secondary are going to cause them a lot of issues. And I think Bo Nix is going to be able to do just enough in this game to be able to get the win. So I am curious, Broncos country, what do you think is going to happen in this game? What do you think the score is going to be? What are your predictions for the overall outcome? How do you think that this Broncos team is going to fare against an injured Chargers team that's still kind of trying to find their way a little bit? Drop those comments down below, guys. I would love to hear your thoughts as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are both free and easy ways to show your support. It helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out, and it helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, I'm your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.